Hi everyone, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to World of Tanks, and today we've got the pleasure of watching Dr. Eyes playing in their tier 10 German heavy tank. It is the classic E100. The E100 was the first ever tier 10 tank that I got back in the day, and I guess I just don't feature this vehicle enough on YouTube. I'm really looking forward to having an opportunity to bask in the glory of an E100 played well, and Dr. Eyes, they've really got this game sorted. So Dr. Eyes is deciding to use the 150mm gun on the E100. It's the classic gun that everybody would use, before Wargaming decided to massively buff the 128mm on this vehicle. And so the 128mm became a real good option for this tank. The 128mm on this vehicle, its alpha damage was buffed from 490 up to 530, and the rate of fire made this thing actually really good for damage per minute. So much so that it could kind of compete with vehicles like the WZ-111-5A, the 113, those kind of mid to high damage per minute tanks. Not in the same league as like a Super Conqueror, although that's been nerfed in the T110E5, but those two tanks got 400 alpha, whereas this thing is packing 530. And so the E100 in that form, it's actually a damage per minute beast. Definitely recommend getting something like a gun rammer up on it. And it's interesting that Dr. Eyes is electing to not use a turbo on the E100, considering that's one of the things that I feel really holds this tank back, and I think it would definitely be a great candidate for experimental turbo. Dr. Eyes is using durability, vert stabs, and a gun rammer, and they're even using a directive. They're using the snapshot directive, which means that's going to double the effect of snapshot. Now, what that means is that if they have snapshot, that's going to be 15% better dispersion when turning the turret. And when you combine that with the vert stabs, that's 35% reduced turret dispersion, which kind of gives this more of like light tank gun handling or medium tank gun handling when the E100's turret is turned. It's interesting that Dr. Eyes would decide to really focus on that part of the E100, considering that the turret on this tank doesn't turn that quickly to begin with. It does feel as if improving the turret traverse on the E100 is really useful on the tank, because as everybody knows, the front of the E100 is flat. Although these days the turret armor is not even that bad unless you're getting jammed by heat rounds in the front. What you're going to see Dr. Eyes do so well throughout this game is intelligently use the E100's armor. The E100, a lot like a mouse, is actually quite high skilled with how you can use the armor. Angling is oh so important in this tank. If you angle the vehicle well and you receive the enemy's fire in the correct manner, what you can do with an E100 turns this thing from being an XP pinata like that E100 in front of Dr. Eyes to being a gnarly vehicle that you don't want to get caught in front of. Okay, so the E100 in this scenario, the heat rounds are just absolutely fabulous. They got 330mm of heat pen on this tank. Actually, 334 if we're being pedantic. That is enough to go through some of the thickest armor in the game, and easily enough to go through the upper hull of the UDES when it's over-angled in that scenario. But the funny thing about over-angling in the UDES on the upper hull, remember, heat can go up to 85 degrees of angled armor, which means that you can't really angle effectively when you don't have a thick armored plate against the E100 when it is compensating by using its gold. And then you can kind of go full circle and try to overmatch with the AP. Wow, great clutch shot there by Dr. Eyes, making good use of the vert stabs on this tank. I'm liking the look of this build, especially on a map like this, Erlenberg Standard, where Erlenberg is one of those kind of maps where you don't really need the speed to be able to get a round on this map. So Dr. Eyes puts a big old chunk into the IS-7. Unfortunately, for the IS-7 on the enemy team, they don't manage to enter Dr. Eyes' tank. Or did they actually with that gold round? I was a bit distracted there. But, oh, yeah, you see, you blink and you miss it as Dr. Eyes ram kills the IS-7 on the enemy team for 68 damage, one short of nice, right? So Dr. Eyes is just throwing their weight around right now, and boy, this vehicle's got some weight attributed to it. 130 tons of German awesomeness before you start to put equipment on the vehicle. And Dr. Eyes is looking to try and feather a shot there against the Foch 455, but decides, yeah, consolation prize. It doesn't look as epic, but boy, is the result still fantastic. 799 damage dealt to the Super Conqueror. Dr. Eyes still looking for a shot on the Foch, but unfortunately the T110E4 falls on the bridge. But this game is still neck and neck. It is dead even on hit points, although Dr. Eyes has one more tank left on their team. Boy, do I love some good German gameplay. And this just, it's about as good as it gets at the E100 with a masterful player like Dr. Eyes really showing you why this tank still needs to be taken seriously in 2024. A lot of people have left the E100, especially people who use the 150mm on the E100. Those players are most likely now using the 60 TP on this tank. Although I will say that the 60 TP, while it's probably just a better E100 for 2024 with the one extra degree of gun depression, the heat rounds on the E100 can do things that the heat rounds on the 60 TP can only dream of because of that extra 20mm or so of penetration. And talk about thickly armored vehicles, 268 version 4 making their way. Come on, Dr. Eyes, you've got to angle that turret. Beautiful stuff now. Should be hard for the 268 version 4 to go in. Interestingly, they actually fire a high explosive round there. Probably not the most sensible thing against the thick upper hull armor of this vehicle, and that allows Dr. Eyes to put another shot into the Object 268 version 4. One more shot should do it. Will they be able to ricochet the follow-up shell? And the 268 version 4 stupidly again just dumping in high explosive rounds. This game, have you noticed the minimap right now? The whole of Dr. Eyes' team are pretty much camping in the corner, and it's very likely that they're going to have a lot of tanks making their way towards them. So, oh my word, Dr. Eyes ricochets a HESH shell there from the FV215B183, showing you just how thick the space protection or the mantlet is on this tank. And the TVP can only pen one out of their magazine against Dr. Eyes. That allows them to follow up with a big old meter shell against the FV and start what is going to have to be multiple shells against the FV unless the artillery continues to be useful, and not hopefully the artillery on the enemy team. Dr. Eyes will get penetrated by an AP shell in the front of the turret unless he angles it. He's got to worry about a TVP behind him as well. He doesn't quite manage to roll high enough to be able to finish off the FV, and now he's got to try and... He's literally between a rock and a hard place right now. The FV misses trying to go for the top bar. The TVP not quite loaded in time, puts one through the tracks there, locking them in place, fluffs the next shell, and Dr. Eyes has got to try and get some shots on. I think he whiffs a heat shell there, unfortunately, at the TVP. Should be firing armor-piercing rounds in this scenario, but you could forgive them. Locked in mortal combat. The artillery on the enemy team doing more job than 3 tanks are able to do, and a Foch 155 has now appeared behind Dr. Eyes as well. He's going to focus the TVP down. The artillery is going to finish off the FV215B183. And where is this Foch 155? I think they were caught reloading. Dr. Eyes is now over 10,000 damage, but they've still got 3 vehicles left on the enemy team that they got to handle. But goodbye, Mr. Foch. And boys and girls, of course the Foch is reloading, because the Foch bounced 3 high explosive anti-tank rounds with 395mm of penetration somehow off the E100. How in God knows how did Dr. Eyes manage to get through that situation? That was sheer grit and determination. And what the E100 is great for, it's just got this idiot-proof armor, at least occasionally, or shall I say armor that is proof against idiots in that scenario, as unfortunately none of the enemy team managed to find the flat armored plates of the E100. Look at all the ricochets at the top left-hand corner of your screen. They've only been shot twice, penetrating shells from the TVP. All the rest has been high explosive in the artillery. And Dr. Eyes now just shy of 12,000 damage dealt and 5 kills to their name, leaves an absolute graveyard right behind them in this scenario. And unfortunately, it doesn't look like they're going to be able to crest the ridge quite quick enough to be able to get the 30B. But you know what? I think this is a very fitting end for the E100, as Dr. Eyes is pretty much on a mound like the true king of World of Tanks they are. What a fabulous round for any vehicle, let alone for an E100. This was one of my favorite games of the year so far, with Dr. Eyes just showing you all the reasons why I fell in love with this vehicle when I first got it back in 2011, or was it 2012? Probably still 2011, I think, towards the end when this vehicle came into the tech tree as a replacement for the Mouse, or not a replacement, but just an additional line of German heavy to be able to go through. and it still shows why this is a true heavyweight of World of Tanks in 2024. So an absolute gargantuan result here for a suitably mammoth round of World of Tanks. Dr. Eyes managed to pick up an ace tank of a 1,651 base experience, just shy of 12,000 damage gives them the high caliber, 3 times what anyone else on their team was able to achieve. A Confederate for dealing damage to 6 tanks that were subsequently killed by their allies, and this was a serious steel war medal, boys and girls, 4,700 damage blocked, with Dr. Eyes showing really good marksmanship here, with only 1 shell missing, and of those, only 2 non-penetrating. And while Dr. Eyes spammed a whole heap of gold rounds in this game, they still make 67,000 credits profit. So, Dr. Eyes, congratulations to you on this ridiculous game of World of Tanks, and thank you so much for uploading it to the whatrecord.com website, because What Replays is frankly just not updating quick enough, so I'm going to be sourcing my replays from here. You made me realize why I fell in love with the E100 13 years ago, and yeah, you make me feel bad about kind of cheating on it a little bit recently with the 60 TP. Anyway, I hope all of you enjoyed this epic game today. If you did, give it a thumbs up. If you hated it, give it a thumbs down. And if you're watching this video as it goes live on Friday, I'm going live all day on twitch.tv/QuickyBaby with brand new drops. And you're going to be able to get yourself 50 Battle Pass tokens. So if, like me, you are lagging behind, especially on my free-to-play account, then come along and get a set of 10 missions, which will give you 5 Battle Pass points a pop, 50 in total, to be able to help you along your way. So really looking forward to seeing you all live right now on twitch.tv/QuickyBaby. And as always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic, and hopefully I'll see you soon.